Well, good evening. It's 2 minutes after 6, and we are going to go ahead and begin. One of the good things, we have a short PowerPoint to go through, and that way, hopefully, by then, more people will have joined because I'm sure you're all here to hear Hiroko. My name is Molly Johnson. I am a board member of Mothers for Peace. And I am going to do a short recap of the meltdowns at Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station, which I will refer to as either Daiichi or Fukushima going forward. That happened in Japan on March 11th, 2011, 11 years ago today. What the initial problems were, the issues with leaking and dumped radioactive water, the effect on the Pacific Ocean, and how Mothers for Peace is helping to keep track of Fukushima radiation on our shores. Some background, construction of the Daiichi nuclear power station began in 1967. The plant consists of 6 boiling water reactors, which were completed between 1970 and 1979. These reactors drove electrical generators with a combined power of 4.7 gigawatts, making Daiichi one of the 15 largest nuclear power stations in the world. It was the first nuclear plant to be designed, constructed, and operated in conjunction with General Electric and TEPCO, that's Tokyo Electric Power Company. In 1990, the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission ranked the failure of emergency electrical generators and subsequent failure of the cooling systems of plants in very seismically active regions as one of the most likely risks. The Japanese Nuclear and Industrial Safety Agency cited this report in 2004, and according to a former NISA scientist, TEPCO did not react to these warnings and did not respond with any measures. At 2:46 p.m., a 9.0 magnitude earthquake struck off of Honshu Island. Reactors 1, 2, and 3 at Daiichi automatically shut down. Reactors 4, 5, and 6 were already offline for maintenance at that time. An hour later, a 46-foot tsunami hit, overflowing the 19-foot seawall, inundating the plant, and disabling all but one underground generator. Most of the emergency core cooling system failed, the only portion still in operation being a steam and battery system which hadn't been tested or used in 40 years. The earthquake and tsunami cut power to pumps that circulated coolant through the reactor cores and cooled water in the spent fuel pools. The pump failures led to the core meltdowns. Between March 13th and 15th, explosions in 3 of the reactors released large amounts of radioactive material into the air, and an estimated 18 quadrillion becquerels of cesium-137 was released into the Pacific Ocean. 150 square miles of the ocean floor was immediately contaminated. The radioactive releases from the meltdowns spread contamination in the air, soil, and water. Air currents carried radiation across the Pacific to the United States. Radioactive iodine and cesium were detected in air, rainwater, surface water, and some food samples collected in California within a few days of the disaster. And the EPA found traces of radioactive iodine in milk. In October of 2011, high levels of plutonium and other radioactive particles were found outside the 30-kilometer evacuation zone. At the peak of the evacuation in 2011, about 165 inhabitants became Fukushima refugees. This term includes 2 categories of people: people who were forced to leave the most impacted territories on the government's order, and people who voluntarily left the area near the nuclear plant in fear of radioactivity. As of 2021, there were still about 36,000 disaster refugees unable to return to their hometown. Fukushima refugees, especially women and children, have faced enormous difficulties and discrimination. As exposure to radiation is a higher risk for women, they have had to make tough choices after leaving Fukushima. Lifting evacuation orders and ending financial support for some refugees have meant women having to choose between dangerous areas or financial hardship. In 2014, radioactive water from the damaged and melted down reactors began leaking into the Pacific Ocean. Levels of iodine-131 in seawater near the plant were measured to be 7.5 million times the legal limit. Contaminated water continued to accumulate at the plant, and contaminated water from reactor 2 was found to be flowing into the sea. In July 2011, it was reported that radioactive cesium was 90 times higher and had spread into the Pacific Ocean. Then, in August, TEPCO reported that radioactive water was leaking into the Pacific Ocean at a rate of 300 tons per day. In December, 230 tons of highly radioactive water were found in a tunnel beneath a building storing contaminated water. Another 1,100 tons of water with radioactive cesium was found in 2 sites near reactors 2 and 3 in January of 2012. Since the nuclear disaster, over 1.25 million tons of waste water has accumulated, stored in well over 1,000 tanks on site. It will run out of land for water tanks this year. In 2020, the Japanese cabinet approved the dumping of radioactive water into the Pacific Ocean over a course of 30 years. They announced it will dump more than 1 million tons of contaminated wastewater into the Pacific Ocean beginning this year, 2022. While the claim is that only tritium with a hazardous life of 300 years is contained in this water, a study published in the Journal of Science in August 2020 found traces of several other radioactive isotopes in the Fukushima wastewater, many of which take much longer to decay than tritium. The contaminated water contains many radionuclides, which we know impact the environment and human health, including strontium-90. Leaked internal TEPCO documents show that efforts to reduce radionuclides to non-detect levels have not eliminated numerous radioactive elements, including iodine, ruthenium, rhodium, antimony, cobalt, and strontium. Some of that radioactive material may have already made its way into local wildlife. Japanese media reported that shipments of rockfish were halted after a sample caught near Fukushima was found to contain unsafe levels of radioactive cesium. In February of 2014, in partnership with Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, San Luis Obispo Mothers for Peace began taking samples of ocean water south of Pismo Pier. The seawater was then sent to Woods Hole to be tested for levels of cesium-134 and cesium-137, markers for radioactive contamination from Fukushima Daiichi. The first test showed elevated levels of cesium-137, which proved that radiation from Fukushima had reached California shores. Between 2014 and 2017, the cesium levels lessened and then began to rise, as you can see on the chart. Then, in February of 2008, the cesium-137 spiked to 6.8 becquerels per per cubic meter of water. Between 2008 and 2021, the cesium levels rose and then began to fall. We will be doing another test in June. And we will continue to take these samples as long as radioactive water is being released and leaked into the Pacific Ocean. Thank you. And I am now going to turn this over to Carol so she can introduce our very special guest.
Ms. Hiroko Aihara. She's a journalist mainly working in Fukushima. She was born and raised in Fukushima City. And after the triple meltdowns of the TEPCO Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, she's been widely covering the nuclear accidents from the viewpoint of a local. The evacuation of victims, reconstruction of livelihoods, compensation, liability issues, health damage, including thyroid cancer from radiation, human rights, and radioactive contamination of the natural environment, and so on. So with no pause, let us go to Hiroko-san. Yoroshiku onegai shimasu.
Thank you very much. My voice is okay?
Yes, everything's fine.
Thank you very much. Good morning and good evening, everyone. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to Mother San Luis Obispo Mother for Peace members and Carol-san set up this wonderful opportunity to introduce the current situation in Fukushima today. So I was born in 1996, July 24. So before the presentation, I found that Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant constructing operation started at July 25th, 1967. So that means that I am just 1 day older than Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. It's very coincidence, but my history is very same age. Fukushima Daiichi and then Fukushima nuclear power plants. So then this is a very local voice, local journalist voice, but I show that some question points, Fukushima now. So this is my introduction. So I was a staff writer for Fukushima local newspaper in Fukushima at the time. I worked at Iwaki City, it's the closest town of nuclear power plant. Then I sometimes covered Fukushima Daiichi Daini nuclear power plant. They had a minor accident or sometimes major accident. So I felt that many people are considering about nuclear power plant accident in Fukushima. Japan capital city of Tokyo and the Fukushima prefecture are about 250 kilometers away. People living in Tokyo and the people living in Fukushima speak a little bit different language as a Fukushima dialect. But the context of the talk are well understood by each other. The two regions are about as distant as that. So 5 years after the nuclear accident in June 2016, I visited Carol and Mothers for Pieces with Kyoko Sato Stanford University. At the time, I have been realized I found something, I have found many things about the situation in the world, Japan and the United States, nuclear power plant situation. And I've been realizing it's since the immediate aftermath of nuclear accident. And I have felt stronger than when I visited stronger than the issue is nuclear power and the nuclear weapons is truly prolonged, and the nuclear issues takes much time, not only 10 years, not only 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. So we have to considering about the next generation, the nuclear power plant accident, radiation issues will be affected to another generations. The Japanese Diet Accident Investigation Committee report that this Fukushima nuclear accident was human-made disaster. But however, when the Pandora box called the nuclear power plant was opened by a man-made disaster, not only the Great East earthquake and the tsunami, that resulted in the loss of external power due to the earthquake, and inevitably to take appropriate measures, radioactivity spread. The people who lived there were thrown away, abandoned people. Many people are evacuated. It's a very tough time. It's still continuing the situation. So this Fukushima nuclear accident was not finished, was not ended yet. And we understand more and more long time. So we will suffer from this situation. So yesterday in Japan, just March 11, today is I think I want to be making today is a starting point, another starting point, the new beginning points to the road to the no nuke and working together, international network, no nuke network. So it is the first day of the 20th anniversary or memorial year of the accident at the Fukushima nuclear power station. So, but we will have a long way toward decommissioning and removing radiation. I hope that today will be the day when we return for confident to tackle anti-nuclear standing radiation exposure and post-nuclear power plant generation together. So now I'm going to the main topic. Sorry. So I would like to introduce all of you, this man. He is 90 years old. First of all, here is a brief description, a brief story of Fukushima nuclear and situation. So when he was 15 years old, young boy, he worked on uranium mining World War II in 1945. He is now still living in Ishikawa town, Fukushima prefecture. 15 years old, he worked on uranium mining in World War II, to development of the atomic bomb project in Japan. So the town of Ishikawa in Fukushima prefecture is known as one of Japan's leading mines for rare earths. At the end of World War II, the Japanese army engaged in uranium mining to creating the atomic bomb, which was used an atomic bomb source in Ishikawa town, but it was failed because rare earths couldn't find. So Mr. Kuniteru Maeda just worked, but just worked. He said that now, at the time, so students worked at the uranium mine. He put just straw sandals, not enough materials. It was a hard time. So this is a case, one of the case, children are driven into war. Children are sacrificed under the war situation and the nuclear promotion situation. So that is an extremely serious problem of the war, nuclear and the nuclear damage. So at the time, the other person who worked with Mr. Maeda in the uranium mining operation was said that it was good things. No uranium were found in Ishikawa town because if in Japan created and used atomic bomb to another country, we will be a murder, mass murder. I reported his story magazines. Many people commented. We didn't know about the history in Fukushima nuclear history, and nuclear power plants will be connected with the war. So I was very impressed report. Many people came from other countries, asked me why there were 10 nuclear power plants in Fukushima. One of the reasons in the 1970s, when nuclear power plants began to build in Japan, the construction site was located, Japanese government considered the construction site was located not so far from the consuming area, metropolitan area. So Fukushima is, before I said 250 kilometers far from Tokyo. So it's a suitable area. But the electric power companies were also aware of the dangers of nuclear power plants and the nuclear weapons. So in that respect, the reason, so Fukushima Prefecture was selected. The Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant site was originally located in the airplane training ground during World War II. So then after ending the World War II, they switched to the nuclear power plant. I've heard the 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant is also common in that were originally a military airfield. The same situation, 3 Mile Island and the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant history. And another reason, this area in Fukushima nuclear power plant area is a small town and not so rich area. So many people wanted to get the money. So Japanese government said that if the nuclear power plant built here, you can get the money, and it turned to the more rich area. So local people believe that. But some people are objective of the nuclear power plant. One of the person is a poet, Mr. Jotaro Wakamatsu. He reported Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant in the 1970s, just established the time. He visited there and reported the situation. He got uncomfortable feelings about the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant situation, which had been created by cutting down the ground and pointing out the underground water and the change ground problem will be occur from an early stage. I mean, the power plant constructed by cutting down the mountains. So the area was enriched underground water. So Jotaro Wakamatsu passed away last year, but he said more early time, it's very then might be affected the underground water to the nuclear power plant. It's dangerous facilities. So then he made many poets. So another one, like a whistleblower, said the situation, the Mr. Kenya Mizuguchi. So emeritus professor of university, specialist of the sea, river, and water creatures and the circumstances of the sea. So he after 1970 in Japan, nuclear power plant built on many places. So he visited some places and they talk, discussion to the fishermen, then how affected the nuclear power plant to the ocean and fishermen's livelihood. Most of he focused on the hot drainage, releasing water from the nuclear power plant, regular operation. The temperature of the water, seawater changed, and it will it's impacted to bad impact to the fish and some creatures in the ocean. So this is one of the story of the radiation materials or radiation garbage will be releasing in the ocean beginning time of the history in Japan. Mr. Mizuguchi, Dr. Mizuguchi happened to meet a senior researcher on the train one day very coincidentally. So that the researcher said that there is a very important interesting materials about the very interesting reports about the Tateyama area in Chiba Prefecture, because Japanese government tried to releasing some radioactive waste to the ocean. This is a prototype, this is a test type case research, but it will be affected to the ocean. At the time, the Prime Minister Yasuhiro Nakasone. Later, Prime Minister Nakasone tried to visit various countries to get Japan's radioactive waste, to get Japan's various countries to ask to receive the Japan's radioactive waste and nuclear waste to the ocean or to the areas contaminated by nuclear tests in the South Pacific countries. However, Japan and another countries, no nuke group and no anti-radioactive waste groups built a network and kicked off the Prime Minister Nakasone's proposal, and so that plan was abandoned. So there is a local fisherman and whistleblower, two persons, Mr. Katsuaki Shiga and Mr. Takeshi Takano. They are still say no to about the radioactive contaminated water from Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant to the ocean. It's very rare to face. Most of the people are anonymous and not clear, but they say that it's polluted water is a problem, and the contaminated water releasing is a problem. So they say that. This is a picture from Greenpeace Japan web page. This is only Japanese, but this is a mechanic from the contaminated water to the ocean. This is underground water. So this is a ground level. So before Jotaro Wakamatsu poet pointed out, so cut off the ground and build the nuclear power plant. So then underground water is still flowing normal operation under the normal operation. But the nuclear power plant facility was exploded. This underground water is flowing into the building. So then the contaminated water is stay inside here and felt the radiation, and the radioactive radiation level is higher because this nuclear power plant is meltdown, and the bottom of the level is stay in the melted fuel still stay there. So this polluted water occur 540 cubic meters every day in May 2014. So in 2020, it decreased to 140 cubic meters, less than half compared with the 2014 to 2020. But in 2021, it became 150 cubic meters every day. So according to TEPCO, it's planned to reduce the amount to 100 cubic meters every day by 2025. But it's unclear because the underground water is still releasing. The situation is not changed, not getting better drastically. The time for the contaminated water in the building passed through a cesium absorbent. The cesium strontium is the first, but subsequently 62 nuclei are removed at the plant called ALPS. ALPS is a radiation materials removal systems, but this ALPS system sometimes broken down and stops and troublesome, and but however 70% or more ALPS treated water exceeds the regulation standard except tritium. So that means the ALPS couldn't remove all of the radiation materials. So it's a problem, but the Japanese government said that so many people, the water in this tank, it's past the ALPS systems, is a treated water, 処理水, treated water. But many facts and TEPCO also accredited, so all of the materials couldn't remove the after ALPS systems. People who are opposed to a nuclear power plant have pointed out, I'm also out one after another, that there is a place to put a tank on the side of the nuclear power plant. So Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant site is more huge. So there are empty spaces. They could put it on the another tank more and more. But the TEPCO said that the empty spaces we will use after take out the melted down fuel. The spaces will build some processes, facilities or something that. So it's the empty space is not for the tank space. But local people is criticized. Some local governments criticized the reason why the TEPCO and the national governments, the reason why the contaminated water releasing to the ocean. One of the reasons is the tank space is limited. So we have to releasing the water to the ocean. But their excuse is unreasonable. The Japanese government has consistently insisted to dumping to the ocean has been implementing it. So December 2012, the government considers options for disposal method. So Japanese government proposed a 5-way to contaminated water process. One is a stratum injection. It's a put it on the underground, and the ocean discharge, ocean releasing water vapor discharge is a and hydrogen discharge. Some way, 5 ways, but the ocean discharge, ocean dumping was the cheapest way. So experts say that there are no problem safety and that is a realistic choice to minimize risk. On the other hand, municipal council in Fukushima prefecture passed a written opinion calling for the prompt presentation of rumor disaster and the rumor countermeasures and the withdrawal of its resolution policy. National Federation of Fishers Cooperative Fishers Associations has not enough explanation to fishermen and citizens and request 5 items such as countermeasures against the harmful rumor like rumor disasters, security of Alps treatment water, contamination, continuation of management of fishermen, and continual consideration on complementation. But then this situation, local fishermen, Mr. Shiga and Mr. Takano also criticized such a situation because local people didn't understand well. So TEPCO and the national government didn't explain enough. But Mr. Takano is still fishing, and sorry, he became a local municipal council members in Namie town, and he is show that his opinion on the government, local government, and some communities. Sometimes he received media interviews and show the situation and problems to the another people, to the public. Another contaminated waters problem is recently. So I will show that recently some problems happened. This is a brochure from the end of 2021. The Agency for Natural Resources and Emerging of the Ministry of Economy and the Trade and Industry and Reconstruction Agency, the METI, distributed this brochure leaflet to elementary and junior high school students throughout Japan. The contents stressed the legitimacy and safety of ocean dumping. So no problem to releasing the ocean. So the water is safe. So look at this picture. So look at this. This is a situation in the some maybe breakfast or so like this is a Japanese miso soup and some fruits. The water is very safe. If human eat and drink and use for the cooking, no problem for the health. So this is a misleading, but the Japanese government distributed to school students. So some local educational committee questioned that because the contaminated drinking water problem is very confused, and there are many opinions. But the government distribute this brochure is very official announcement. Additionally, national government sent this brochure to the schools directly, rather than not distributed to the board of education in local municipalities. So many school teachers, many mothers, fathers, and many people are criticized. So some schools are stopped to distributing. Some schools are stopped to the share and bring back from the students. So this week, in the Japanese Diet, House of Council members question to the national government. So this brochure is exaggerated. The water is contaminated water. It's very safe. It is misleading, but the national government not answered. But they say that we have had some problem. How to distribute? So this distributed way is not appropriate, but the contents is right or wrong. They had no answer. And also national government still keeping the releasing contaminated water to the ocean. This case is also one of the bad ways to use children to fight and brush off the criticism and pretend safetyness. So after March 11 in Fukushima, many people said that we took on the safetyness of nuclear power plant. But after nuclear accident, national government and some nuclear village sectors push on more and more safetyness to using children. This is another brochure also. This was distributed to junior high school students. So this picture, please look. This picture is a human being. The guy is drinking water contain the tritium material. So this is the only Japanese story, but tritium has tritium is not affected to the health. Don't worry about to the health. So this is one of the misleading, huge misleading, because this contaminated water is go through the meltdown fuel. Japanese government is tritium. This water is take off the radiation materials, go through the Alps facilities. So, but this brochure, I want to say that this brochure is a safety myth, reproducing the safety myth. This shows that around the world, so tritium water is releasing from the nuclear facilities, and so no affection found from the tritium. No affection, no health damage from the no health damage by tritium water. This blue area is nuclear facilities existing country. So also this is a safety myth is teaching in the school in Japan. We have as a Fukushima local, so Fukushima native. So I like to work together around the world. So then Carol-san requested me, so what should we do? The next step, or what should we do? Kick off the nuclear power plant and build the no-nuke world. So then, this is not only this, but for example, submission of written requests, written opinions, and written protests to the Japanese embassies, Japanese Liberal Democratic Party, New Komeito Party, and the other governments and ruling parties in various countries. And the local government in Japan and the Fukushima Prefecture, please writing, sending some letters, please stop releasing the water, and the TEPCO to the TEPCO also. And the resolution of opposition in United States, municipalities and parliaments. Discussion on the problem of contaminated water by taking advantage of various opportunities in the community, school, and workplace. Opinion to the media and civic groups or NGO, NPOs, proposals, commentaries, postcards. Especially featured in overseas media. So finally, so I was very shocked. Ukrainian situation. Former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said that nuke sharing. So it's a sharing to keep nuke to another countries. So I thought that it's racial. So, but we have to work more hard. No nuke and no releasing water to the ocean, because not only the Japan problem, but also another countries, of course, the United States, Korea, and China or another countries. Sorry, so this is that's also one of my beginning up the problem of the contaminated water situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I think my internet connection was going a little bit wacky, and so you might have had a few moments of difficulty hearing or seeing the screen. I have to apologize for that. But I think it was very interesting to see the historical flow of how Fukushima residents have been affected by the nuclear industry long before the accident, starting from, I did not know the World War II situation where they were sending children into the uranium mines without any protective clothing to, try to find uranium for the war, atomic, the bomb program. And then the fact that they had built the reactor in such a way that it was already contaminating the water so much, even before the accident. And of course, it made things much worse afterwards. But I'm sure everyone has many questions, or maybe some of you have a few questions. And if you do, please either raise your hand or type it into the chat. And at the end, I think we have some information too about other things that we can do to help the situation in Fukushima, especially like with the children's thyroid cases, the release of water. But like Aihara-san was saying, I think that Japan is very vulnerable to outside opinion. So I think the more pressure foreign countries can exert on Japan, more pressure the people from outside of Japan can exert onto the governments of Japan and different organizations, the better.
And Michael,
okay.
You had your hand up there and you're on mute.
No longer on mute. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we sure can.
You know, I'm really excited about this. This is my first time I've been to this meeting. I was invited by Pip Reynolds in California. I'm a little bit of an international person. In case anybody does recognize the name or doesn't, I'm very strong in the entertainment business. My thought is that this group, this little nucleus of a group, really can make a lot of noise worldwide. Because if we're like 30 miles deep from any coastline, then we're a little bit safer on cleaning it up. We can't just lean all towards Japan for the nuclear waste, because all countries are responsible for the coastline when they have one. So I'm thinking, why can't we just make this an international affair? That's just one question. I'm sure I have a lot more as we go along. And I know that we can make an impact on all countries. That's my question.
日本語でですね、なんか水に流すっていう言葉があるんですね。まずいことは水に流しちゃえばいいっていう言葉があります。なんかそれが悪い方に今来ていると思います。
However, if a piece of wood like lumber is going down the stream, it's still a piece of lumber. Just like nuclear waste is just drifting, it's still nuclear waste.
はい、おっしゃる通りです。日本の規制基準がちょっとまずいところが非常にありまして、海に流すときに水で薄めるって言ってるんですけれども、水で薄めるから薄まるから影響はないと言ってるんですが、その中に含まれている総量規制っていうんですか、総量、全体の量については規制する基準がないんですね。
And we have a couple of people that Jane would like to say something, and then Sheila Baker.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for the dilution is not the solution to pollution. Right, so. But Jane?
Yes, you can hear me, I think. Yes. Hiroko had a slide there where she named organizations or government or TEPCO to which a person or an organization could send letters to pressure them to do a better job. So my question is there a mechanism? I think there must be a way for Hiroko and maybe Carol and other people to write down the specific addresses and get them either in the chat or send them in a follow-up to this, that can happen?
はい、後でチャットに書けばよろしいですかね。
And I know there are, I've signed petitions from Japanese organizations that are pressuring the Prime Minister and others. So, maybe include in that how one can go through an existing organization rather than start your own letter or a petition or both. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you very much.
You got the question. I'm sure it will be addressed.
すみません、先ほどの方のちょっとご質問にちょっとだけ付け加えるんですけれども、日本政府はですね、日本の領土の中だったら捨てても、そのワシントン条約 ロンドン条約ですかに影響しないということで、シンクタンク、日本政府じゃないんですけど民間の企業がですね、シンクタンクに頼んでその南の鳥島の方に捨てられないかっていうことの研究が上がっていて、それを国会議員が質問したってことがありまして、私が思うにも最初から海に流すっていうことは、一番安い方法だったから、もう最初からかなり早い段階で決まっていたのではないかと思うんです。これは今取材継続中ですけれども。
We have many questions on not much time, so I think maybe we could start with Sheila. She had her hand raised first.
Right, and then Kathy Awane, and then Beverly, I believe,
Yes.
is the stack. And then there are a couple of great comments in the chat. So let's start
Okay.
with Sheila, yeah.
Yeah, okay, real quickly. I was informed by and invited to be on this by the San Luis Obispo Mothers for Peace, and thank you so much. I've been a long time since I've been involved in nuclear issues. John Bertolucci was involved in the Sonoma. I'm in Sonoma County currently, and he had, I think, the Sonoma response, what they call the Sonoma response, and he was monitoring the ocean water here along the coast. And I looked him up, and then I also found the Fukushima response Bay Area, who had a rally today in San Francisco starting at 3:00, and at the San Francisco Japanese consulate at 275 Battery. And so I think there's a lot of activity and a lot of interest. The rally had speakers and music and poetry and voices, and I'm sure lots and lots of petitions and letters. So just wanted to mention that, and thank you millions for this. Thanks.
ありがとうございます。すごい不思議に感じられるかもしれないんですけども、福島っていうか福島ではデモとかをやるとなんかすごい地域の人に批判されたりして、なんか皆さんが萎縮していて、でなかなかデモがなかったんですが、今年はデモが行われましたし、集会ももちろん集会は毎年行われてるんですけども、結構大掛かりな自発的な自然発生的なデモっていうのが起きているので、もう皆さん大変な状況でもこらえきれなくなっているっていう感じです。
Great. Aihara-san, thank you so much for your everything. Thank you for today. I was just going to respond to Pip's first comment about what can we do about a petition. And I think if you feel the calling, I think it's really, really important. But if you need a network, I can give an example of something we did in 2012. I was living in Japan at the end of my 25 years before I came back to California. And what we thought of is we did a really important petition. I think there was 250,000 signatures, and it was worldwide. And there was a day we tried to do on a world calendar, like 3 days, where we protested in a large petition to many embassies around the world, the protesting of incineration of Fukushima debris. I was living in Wakayama, and we protested this in my city. We got 100 people to go to the city hall, and we got Wakayama City to stop the planning of being paid by the Japanese federal government money in exchange for Fukushima radioactive debris going to come to our city, and then we would incinerate it without the proper filters, and then it would go into the air, and this would go into the crops, nearby schools. Craziness. My house was close to this incinerator, so we fought that away. Then they started it right before I evacuated in Osaka, and that was no problem. They had no problem incinerating the debris. It's a big business. Then they get it into ashes, and then they perhaps do cement construction. So what we did is we did a world petition, and it was quite, we were so excited. I was so excited. And then we found out it went to the Tokyo embassy and to the government, and literally We had letters after letters, phone calls after phone calls to the Tokyo government. This was during Naoto Kan was still the prime minister, and it literally stopped. There was no response. So we did not have a good enough Japanese foundation to back up those conversations. If you can help us, Aihara-san, to get that, we need a really strong connection to the government. I was a foreigner with a husband who is LDP. My husband was LDP connected with the politics. That's not going to help you, right? So I think that I'm just trying to give an idea of maybe we need a strong government. It may be a chance to do this. And so please, for PIP and all of these questions, there is a possibility. We just didn't have, we had so many signatures, but it didn't get to the right people. There was not public awareness. Maybe I'm dreaming a dream, but help me out here.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Unfortunately, my internet connection is starting to fail, and we are running overtime right now. So I think Molly has one more bit of information on where we can send our support. If Molly, you could want to share that slide briefly, and it's kind of it's a little bit small, but we will put that information up on our website, and I think Jane can put it in the chat as well. The main part about where to go, the docs.google.com, and also the website www.311support.net/. And we will put all this information that we gathered today up on our website. So hopefully, you can go back there and check it in another day or two and see.
And this actually this lawsuit was in the news today. So this is very current. And so that you can save the chat. We really encourage everyone to do that, because then you'll have all those links and all that other stuff in there. I noticed that there is some good info in there. So make sure and save your chat.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. We certainly appreciate your taking your time. I think we learned some many new things today, and thank you to Hiroko Aihara. 本当にどうも今日はありがとうございました。
どうもありがとうございました。
とっても興味深いお話で。
どうもありがとうございます。